Greetings, my beautiful lovelies. It's Emmy. How are you? It's great to see you and welcome back. Today's video is sponsored by Olipop. Olipop are reimagined sodas using real ingredients, fiber, and botanicals to make a drink that supports your gut and tastes great. Olipop's newest limited edition flavor is a Shirley Temple. I remember as a kid feeling like a Shirley Temple was so fancy and mysterious. I think it was the maraschino cherry suspended in the drink. I just thought, I want one of those. Shirley Temple, of course, was a child actor in the 1930s, and this drink was created just for her so she would have something fancy to drink. So let's give Olipop's version a taste. I hope it's pink. It is. Alrighty, let's give it a taste. Cheers. And this tastes like a little kid's dream. You've got cherry in there, a little hint of vanilla, you've got sweetness, and then it's all tied together with a pleasant effervescence. And it comes in the cutest can. Look at that, pink with a cherry and an umbrella. And I think this drink would be perfect for dry January, a little post-holiday excess. Have yourself a classic little mocktail. So if you'd like to try the new limited edition Shirley Temple flavor, you can click the link down below and buy two, and Olipop will pay you back for one. You can find Olipop at most major retailers, including Walmart and Target. Big thanks to Olipop for sponsoring this video and for allowing me to make better videos for all of you. Alrighty, my lovelies, today we're going to be testing out the very viral dumpling lasagna. This has been going around, and today I want to taste it to see if it's an improvement on the classic dumpling and if it's easier and what is all the hype about. So the inspiration for this, of course, is the soup dumpling, which contains a bit of soup in it. So when you pop it into your mouth, it injects a nice little pop of soup. Some people actually like to pop it first into a spoon and drink the soup before they eat the dumpling. All kinds of ways of doing it, but basically the reason why I'm mentioning this is because it's a juicy style dumpling. So instead of wrapping it, we're going to be creating a layer dish similar to a lasagna, but with Chinese inspired flavors. It sounds great. I'm just curious to see how textures might be changed, flavors might be changed, and if this saves any time. So some creators say this makes it totally accessible to people, and I always thought dumplings are pretty accessible. Maybe the pleating is what they were implying, that the pleating is difficult, but you don't have to make a fancy dumpling. You could always just fold the dumpling in half if you have a wonton wrapper. You don't have to bother with the pleats. So in that sense, it's very easy, but it does take some time. And I'm thinking that's the key to this dish, is that you might be saving some time because you're not spending all this time creating dumplings, right? But we shall find out. I will also show you how to pleat dumplings in case you are curious. I have a very, very, very old video that I made back when I was living in Japan, showing you how to make gyoza, which are Japanese style dumplings, but they are usually pan fried. But that will show you some pleating action if you are curious. So dumplings are delicious. So let's go ahead and get started. In this bowl, I have 3/4 of a pound of ground pork. And to that, because we like the combination of pork and shrimp, I'm gonna add a little bit of coarsely chopped raw shrimp. This is 5 small shrimp, so about 1/4 pound, just to balance that out to be about 1 pound. That's totally optional. That's just what we like in our dumplings. And that's what's great about these recipes. You can customize them to however your family or you like them. Now, typically I would shred some cabbage to put in my dumpling filling, but this recipe calls for putting the layer of cabbage in the ramekin. So I'm going to do that for some of them, and then others I'm going to add some cabbage just because I have it. So I've got some finely shredded cabbage here. I'm going to add a handful of cabbage. I typically would add more, but since we're adding a layer of cabbage in the lasagna, I'm just going to put some in here. Okay, next I've got some green onions, pre-chopped. I'm going to put about 1/4 cup of that in there. I've got a generous clove of garlic in there. Actually, I'm going to put 2 cloves of garlic. And then I've got some fresh ginger. I'm going to grate some of that in there. I like using a really fine grater because ginger can be pretty fibrous. So we don't want to have any fibers in our dumplings. So that's 1/4 teaspoon of grated ginger. We're gonna add some cooking wine. This is Shaoxing wine. Combine this at your Chinese supermarket. I'm gonna add 1 tablespoon of that. Now we're gonna add some soy sauce. And I'm going to add 3 tablespoons. That's a lot of soy. 2 to 3 tablespoons of soy and a teaspoon of sesame oil. I feel like that's a pretty essential flavoring. White pepper. I like a good amount, so about a 1/2 teaspoon. And just a pinch of salt. This is completely optional, but I'm adding a 1/4 teaspoon of MSG and a teaspoon or so of oyster sauce. And then I've got some cornstarch or tapioca flour, whatever you've got handy, just in case I need it. So I'm gonna see how this mixes up. And if it's a little loose, I'll add a little bit of starch. The reasoning of putting the starch in is to absorb some of the moisture so that your filling doesn't leak out of the wrapper. Soup dumplings actually have a little bit of science in them. It's really kind of ingenious. So to create the soup, what they do is they create a broth and they cook it with gelatin, and they create like a jello. And they chop the jello up and put it into the mixture like this so that it's solid at colder temperatures. And then once it cooks and heats up in the steamer, it melts and turns into soup. But the wrapper of a soup dumpling is also a little bit thicker because, as you can imagine, it has to hold in the soup. So the wrappers that I've purchased are pretty thin. It's a thinner style, so don't want it to be too wet for a dumpling situation. I'm going to be making the bulk of these into dumplings actually. So I'm adding hefty, about a tablespoon of starch to that. See how it tightens everything up? Okay, great. To assemble your lasagnas, you're going to need some sort of a vessel. These ones are really cute. These are ramekins. They're used to make soufflés. They're a nice round size and they can accommodate your wrapper. If you don't have these, you could use a bowl. You could also use a small casserole dish. Anything that can fit inside your steamer. So we're going to take a bit of our filling. That would be the amount in 1 dumpling, I would surmise. Enough to fill the bottom to make 1 little layer. Then we're gonna add a wrapper. So that would be 1 dumpling's worth. That's another thing I was thinking about. So yes, this saves you time because you're layering things up rather than making an individual dumpling. But 1 portion, I guess, depending on how big your ramekins are, it's gonna be 2 dumplings worth. So a single serving is pretty small unless you eat multiple. So over the second layer of meat, I'm going to add a layer of cabbage. And then my final layer of meat over the top. Now some people added a splash of water, about a tablespoon of water, and then the final dumpling wrapper on top. So 3 layers of wrapper, 3 layers of meat, and 1 layer of cabbage. So then we're going to place them into a pan that's got about 1 inch of water in them, or you can put them in a steamer if you've got one. So pretty simple, right? Let's make another one. Let's make one in a ramekin this time. A little bit smaller, so enough to fill the bottom. Add a wrapper. Another layer of meat. This time we're adding a layer of cabbage. This is Napa cabbage, by the way. I picked them up at the Chinese supermarket because I was there. I'm like, oh, Napa cabbage, perfect. But green cabbage would work too. So I've placed them into a saucepan and I'm going to add water till it goes up about 1 inch up the side of the dish. So I'm gonna make 3 more and add them to my pot, and we're gonna let this cook for about 20 minutes. And then while it's cooking, I'll show you how to shape a dumpling. Alrighty, be right back. Alrighty, my lovelies, the water has come up to a simmer and it is rattling a bit. Now, I've reduced the temperature a bit, but I do want this to remain hot. So hopefully this won't be too distracting. What I should have done was placed a small little tea towel at the bottom to eliminate some of the rattling, but didn't think of that. At any rate, let me show you how to simply wrap a dumpling. Now, it doesn't have to be complicated at all. If you want a simple dumpling, all you need to do is get your round skin here, add some water, along half of it. Now this is pretty important in my opinion. You're gonna add some filling to it, but don't put too much. Just about this much. That's about a teaspoon of filling. If you add too much, it'll be difficult to pleat and it might burst when it's cooking. So the simplest dumpling is simply this. You just make a little half moon, like that, just like that. Make sure you press it nice and tight so that it doesn't burst while you boil it. That's it. These are the very first dumplings I learned how to make, little half moons. They're great, they taste great. This is another one that I learned very early. So same beginning here, we've dampened half of it, placed our filling. Now we're going to fold it up like a taco, like that. Then on this side, push this up and pleat, right? And this side too, on both sides. And then we're going to do a series of pleats. Use your thumb and press. Thumb and press. I usually do about 3. And then you finish with that on the end. Hold it all together and you get one of those. Here's a version I made as a kid. And you just take the same amount of filling, and I would do it on a plate. And I would fold it up like a taco, and then I would just squish it. Like that, just squishing it. See, not nearly as neat, but it does the job. Just make sure it's tight. And then if you make a flat bottom, you can make them into pot stickers, right? And you can pan fry them. They'll sit in your pan to make a nice little pot sticker. So easy. You don't need any special tools or anything. So I've got about 15 minutes left on these. I'm gonna let these keep going and then we'll give them a taste. All right, lovelies, see you in a little bit. All right, dumpling lasagnas. Look at that. Whoa. That one poofed up like mad. Cute. I always like how the wrappers kind of shrivel up and look kind of brainy. Love that. Add some chili crisps to this and some green onions to the top. Oh, look how it just brightened things. Isn't that great? It's gonna taste delicious too. So that's something I almost forgot to mention. Whether you're making dumplings individually or making dumpling lasagna, be sure to keep your wrappers moist. They tend to dry out really quickly, so if you're making a big batch of dumplings, for example, my mom would always suggest taking a paper towel that's just a little bit damp and then draping that over the wrapper so that they don't get dry, because if they get dry, they're very difficult to handle and they don't want to take the dumpling shape or even the lasagna shape. But that's why I'm putting the lid on these cooked dumplings so that they don't dry out. All right, lovelies, moment of truth. Let's give our dumpling lasagna a taste. It looks great. Love the presentation in a little soup bowl like this. Curious to see how filling this will be though. Okay, so let's tuck in, get a bite of everything. All right, that looks great. Alrighty, let's give it a taste. Itadakimasu. Wicked hot. Mmm. Scrumptious. Scrumptious. A little salty. Just 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, not 3. But really good. As an eating experience, the ratios are a little bit different to a typical dumpling. I think this leans a little bit more towards the meat, a little bit more like a 50-50 experience of meat to wrapper. While when I have a typical dumpling, I feel like it's a little bit more shifted towards wrapper, just a bit. But besides that, it's delicious. Simple to put together. The taste is terrific. And it tastes terrific. It's a little bit difficult to eat. I almost need a knife to cut through the wrappers. But if this represents a point of entry for dumpling eating for you, then 100,000,000% try it. Because dumplings should be enjoyed by all, and they are wonderful. And if this does it for you, then I am 100%, 1,000,000% supporter. There are a few advantages, I think, having these in the dumpling form. One of them is that you can add them to a soup. So if you want to have a dumpling soup, like a wonton style soup, you can do that with dumplings. This, you would have to add broth to it, which might make it a little bit difficult to eat in this small bowl. This definitely would come together a lot faster if you're cooking a quick meal than shaping a army of dumplings. So, huge advantage in that case. I'm gonna eat this whole thing before I even have supper. Alrighty, my dumplings. Alrighty, my lovelies. The dumpling lasagna is totally up to the hype. I totally recommend making it. Super easy. And if it's your entry point to dumpling eating, then I a million times recommend, because dumplings should be enjoyed by all. Alrighty, my lovelies. Thanks so much for watching, and big thanks to Olipop for sponsoring this video. If you'd like to try Olipop for yourself, you can click the link down below, and when you buy 2 cans, Olipop will pay you back for 1. Alright, my lovelies, thanks as always for watching. I hope you enjoyed that one. I hope you learned something. Please share this video with your friends. Follow me on social media, like this video, subscribe, and I shall see you in the next one. Toodaloo, take care, bye! Alrighty, back to finishing my lasagna. Lasagna. Pretty tasty though.